Okay, good evening, everyone, and we are in person after a year and several months. We did call the meeting to order already, just came out of executive session, nothing to report back. So we're going to roll right into announcements, and Josue wanted to talk a little bit about the hybrid model that we're working on right now.
Thank you, Brian. I just want to remind folks that are in person attending and those that are watching from wherever they are through online, Channel 5, Facebook, Zoom, and YouTube. So we're broadcasting through all those channels. So this is our first meeting of a hybrid model. So council and a few folks are here in person. And those that are watching online, you may experience a different, you may have a different experience, particularly if you're joining us via Zoom, on the audio and the audio quality, because we are all using the regular council mics, and those are being fed through a single channel that Sean is putting out. And I want to thank Sean because he's figured out quite the solution here to get the technology existing in the room and being able to convert that to a digital channel, and it then is being broadcasted to 4 distribution channels. I think Governor DeWine will be honored if he had such a technology and skill set at his office.
Do you want to mention, in terms of following the CDC guidelines,
Yes.
what our expectations are?
Yes, while the governor has rescinded all the public health orders, we as a municipality and as a government administration have the authority to implement policies and procedures within the facilities, like private businesses and other property owners. So our policy here in the building is that if you are vaccinated, you may be in the facilities without a mask. If you're not vaccinated, we request that you wear a mask. We are not asking for proof of vaccine, so we have no way of knowing who is vaccinated and who is not. So we ask that you do the right thing that's in the benefit of your own health and the health of others, and mask if you're able to. For those that are vaccinated and choose to wear a mask, great. I myself am vaccinated and go to business and wear masks. So I think we want folks to feel comfortable doing what's right for them and for others.
Okay. Thank you, Josue. Do we have any other announcements? Kevin Stokes?
Yes, I have a couple of things. Thank you, Brian. And both of the things that I want to talk about, they're represented in the packet. One of them is the cost of poverty experience. I've shared about this before. It's an experience. It'll be a virtual experience. It's being sponsored by Inclusive and Resilient Yellow Springs. Again, you've heard me talk about Inclusive and Resilient Yellow Springs and the Livable, Equitable, Age-Friendly Coalition. But on Wednesday, June 30th, from 5 to 6:30 p.m., and there will be information shared with a link. The poster that's in the packet does have a link to go to this virtual cost of poverty experience. And what this does is it gives, I would submit that most of us, maybe up here on the panel here, are middle class at least. And sometimes when we're in this position and making decisions, we're often making decisions for folks who are in a different strata than we are. When I was, and I know I'm getting a little long-winded for an announcement, so I'll change gears. But the point is, what this does is it helps us better understand the experiences that folks have who are in poverty and the challenges that folks have when they don't have the support systems that most of us do. So again, Wednesday, June 30th, 5 to 6:30 p.m. It's a virtual experience, and you'll see more information both in the packet and elsewhere throughout the village, sharing information. So I encourage each of you to learn about that, and please attend. And I'd also like to mention the Juneteenth celebration that the village is sponsoring. It'll be Saturday, June 19th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Gaunt Park. There's a poster here in the packet as well. I believe there's posters downstairs, and you'll find them other places throughout the village. We'll be featuring World House Choir, poetry and singers, there'll be book giveaways, food trucks, and more. Again, that's Saturday, June 19th, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Gaunt Park. There is also another event going on at about the same time, and I'm going to ask Lisa to take it away for that.
Hey, thanks. There's a lot of great stuff to do on June 19th. There's a second community event organized by Human, and they are celebrating Juneteenth and the new Virginia Hamilton mural by artist Pierre Nagley that's in Keith's Alley. And the mural, if you haven't seen it, is on the sidewall of the Yellow Springs News building. And it starts at 2 o'clock. So there's a little bit of overlap, but not a lot. So
Where is it?
it's at the mural in Keith's Alley, right by the mural, and there's going to be a talk at 2 o'clock and followed by some bands, including Mojo Power, and a barbecue. So it should be a fun day. I'm sorry I'm going to be out of town and miss all this fun.
We'll represent you.
Yeah, have some barbecue for me.
All right, Josue, and you're going to talk about June 24th? Is that one of your updates?
No, well, I have, no, then you want to?
Go ahead, you can add that.
All right, I've got two announcements. One, it's key, it's about the pool. Our pool, I have announced last week that we had an issue with our motor and our pump. Both gave out. We were able to do a rebuild in-house with the motor, but the pump is not operable because it cannot maintain a specific water flow. So that's still being repaired. I do not have an estimated day of repair. I'm hopeful they'll be within the next 2 weeks, but the pool remains closed until we're able to fix. The other is blacktop resurfacing we have going on this week and next week. We've got blacktop happening at King Street, High Street, Polecat, at the 1430 Polecat section of the South Walnut. That's by the school. The bike path, if you recall, a couple years ago, we had a very ambitious plan to redo the shared lanes on South College. So we've got that in the works this year, and that's covering the area from Xenia to Wright Street. That's on South College. Want to just remind you that that's a section of the full length. The other section will be done hopefully next year. There will be some challenges we face next year because of trees that are in the way, very precious trees that are in the way of the path. So that's something that we will have to have a conversation about and make decisions on. So those are my two announcements for the moment. Sorry, I'm blanking on June 24th.
The Luciana Gutschall?
Oh, yes. We are very excited to announce that we have a new village mediation coordinator that's joined the team. So Luciana Leaf was our new mediator. She's got tons of experience in the village and with government operations. So we're honored to have that. We will have a meet and greet on the 24th to welcome Luciana. We'll also be joined that day by John Gudgel, and I can't thank enough what John Gudgel has done for our government and our community. He's already missed, and he contributes so much to our community, resolving conflict, and it just make us a better community. So he'll be on site, and we also get to celebrate him.
And the time?
The time.
I think it's 6:30 to,
Yes, it's in the afternoon. So it's
Afternoon.
I mean the evening. I'll pull it up right now. I'm
What
glad
day?
I have my computer.
June
Now,
24th. I'll just highlight a few other things. Don't forget YS Pride, last Saturday of every June. So it's going to be June 26th. There's going to be another great parade that goes through the community, and it's going to be an event that is going to culminate at Antioch University Midwest. There'll be some speakers and other things there, and I expect some dancing and fun celebrating as well. Also, I wanted to mention we had a great groundbreaking for the Yellow Springs Smart Dog Park, And one of the things that came out of that was that this is really a community effort that everybody's been a part of, and so much appreciated. So many people to thank, and Johnny Burns has been great. And I also wanted to thank our chief, who made sure that the Memorial Day flags got out Monday morning. And in general, our police team has been really challenged as we're in transition mode and sort of seeing how things have, I think, come back maybe even a lot stronger than pre-COVID. A lot more tables on the street, a lot more street vendors setting up, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Last thing is, for anybody that's listening, if you have not gotten your free bike light, that is happening right over at the train station. So there are people there. We would be there if we could, putting bike lights on for folks, and we want to make sure that we are being safe when we are on our bikes. So, anything else? Yes, Mary?
I have one announcement. The Glen Cottages, which is the pocket neighborhood that Home Inc. is building on Xenia Avenue, is now taking applications for the rental units, and you can apply online at yshome.org.
Okay. So, all right.
The meet and greet for mediation, June 24, 6:30 to 8.
Yeah, you were right.
Right here, and at room A and B.
All right, 6:30 to 8. Okay, be there to welcome Luciana, who's actually been a part of the village team for a long time, and to thank John Gudgel, who we will make stay in the community no matter what. Okay.
So it's going to be in A and B?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. All right, so next up we have the consent agenda, which are our minutes from May 17th, our last meeting. And so I'll entertain a motion to confirm.
I move.
Second.
Okay, and I think we can do all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great, okay. Review of the agenda. Anything we need to add, modify, or remove?
Did you all get a piece of paper that says Ohio Housing
Yes.
Council?
Just now.
Yeah, yeah. I would like to just take like a few minutes, maybe in their new business, to ask whether council would support supporting this letter.
Okay. Anything else?
I know Rob Fairley is here because I encouraged him to come to speak during the citizen concerns section before I realized that the street vendors were actually on the agenda for a discussion. I know we tend to say they can't speak, but he's made a special trip here. I was wondering if he could, I don't know if you can stay the whole time, Rob. Yeah, so could he, even though it's on the agenda, he'd like to speak earlier rather than later.
Sure, I think it's citizen concerns, if that's okay. Okay, great. Anything else with the agenda review? Okay, great. Then, Mary Ann, petitions and communications.
Brittany Baum had communication suggesting that we follow the state and CDC guidelines regarding mask requirements, and Terry Smith did as well, requesting that we lift the outdoor mask requirement, which we did. Mary Eby wanted to end the outdoor mask requirement, same deal. Maria Whitaker had a communication about masks and her concern about the potential for prejudice against people who are unvaccinated. Brian, you had some photographs from street vendors on Xenia Avenue. Alex Scott submitted the DORA survey from the downtown businesses. And Kevin mentioned the Juneteenth poster and the Inclusive Resilient Yellow Springs program. I had an article about exclusionary zoning and something from the American Jobs Plan. And Ellis Jacobs had information about the stay and pay to stay resolution regarding rental units that I think I will request we put on a future agenda.
Yep, sounds good. Okay.
And that's it.
Yeah, and there's also the other thing was the standard, the source of income
Yes.
legislation. And I should mention, to clarify, those photos were forwarded from Sylvia Ellison, one of our residents. Okay, so we're going to move now into legislation. And first of all, we've got ordinance 2021-11. I guess we'll read it by title only, since we've got two versions.
Okay. This is establishing Chapter 212 of the Codified Ordinances, Ethics.
Okay, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second? Okay. All right, so where do we begin? I think, Brianne, we begin with you, and we'll talk about why you brought this forward and what the ordinance is about.
I had my COVID test today and I'm negative, but I've got surgery on Friday, so I hope I stay that way. As far as the ethics ordinance, it's up to council to decide what ethical standards you adhere to, as far as you're all obligated to follow the Ohio ethics law. But one of the things that I've seen in my almost a year here is that I get a lot of ethics questions about conflicts of interest, recusals, and council can set more stringent standards for your boards and commission members and for yourselves. And that's what I've heard from some of you, that you would like to see more clear-cut rules on what the ethics rules are and how we can educate not just our employees, but our volunteers on our boards and commissions about what they're obligated to follow when it comes to the Ohio ethics law and what we would expect of our public servants. So the two versions in front of you, I worked with Councilmember Curlis on one that was taking into account, what do we do if we just say we're going to implement a training requirement. The original version is also before you because what I had proposed based on feedback from council members and board and commission members was having some sort of penalty to where if a person did not comply with a training requirement, they could be removed as a board or commission member. So those are the variations between the two versions. Again, one of them, for lack of a better way to put it, has more teeth than the other version does. But it's really up to council to say whether we do want to impose these as a codified measure to set rules for ourselves and our employees and our board and commission members going forward in the future.
Okay. Let's see, Laura, do you want to follow up a little bit with your thoughts?
Yeah, and I appreciate Brianne's call to me to give me the opportunity for feedback, but as I told her on the phone, I'm probably not going to vote for this because this was not something that came from council people. It came from outside of council. And there are two big issues. It's totally redundant. The Ohio ethics law is there. It applies to all of us. We don't need to tell everybody with an ordinance that we have to follow it. We have to follow it. So why do we need to put it in the books? That's number one. And most of the stuff in the ordinance, if you read it, is policy stuff, like thou shalt do training on it. Okay, that's not an ordinance. That's let's just have a policy that we make sure people get trained and they turn in their certificate to Judy, et cetera. I'm really and the more after we talked, Brianne, I started reflecting on that penalty language, and I started thinking as a former prosecutor, like how would I enforce this, even if it was there? And that brought up a whole bunch of concerns, like who's qualified to enforce? Do we have anyone and would it be the police? Would it be you? I know you and I take ethics training, but I wouldn't call myself an ethics expert by any means to try to enforce the specific Ohio ethics law on somebody else, I'm not sure we have anybody qualified to enforce. Then we'd have to hire somebody to be that enforcer person, to bring the charge. Who gets to complain? As I've said before, people have a right to complain. It's one of the rights of government that people get to complain about us. That doesn't mean every complaint is actionable. And people deserve benefit of the doubt, due process, and there's no due process in here, and a defense. So the enforcement part, I'm the more I thought about it, the more I got very concerned about it. And there is a whole ethics enforcement group in the Ohio Ethics Commission that they're specialists, and that's what they do. And they take complaints and they know when something's actionable, when it isn't. So I'm glad we have two versions, but I still think the version without the penalty part is basically a policy. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I have a couple questions, and then see what other comments or questions there are. So I appreciated seeing the different examples that other municipalities have done, and I guess a lot of them have, put in policy, if that's the way we describe it. But I wondered one thing is, why aren't we referencing our guidelines for boards and commissions as well as our council rules and procedures?
Because those have been done by resolution and not by ordinance.
Okay. So that's kind of the difference with some of these others that talk about their codes of conduct and stuff? Okay. And then my other question was, actually, I really like the training idea, and I did want to clarify, when Judy's mentioned in the past that she is doing a training on behalf of council, it's the Sunshine Law training, not ethics training. So I want to make sure everybody understands that, basically Judy's doing that because we've all gone through extensive Sunshine Law training. Mine was like a whole day. And so, Judy would then report back if there was some change, which there rarely is. I mean, I think Laura saw something. So I like this idea a lot of ethics training, because that's not something that I think we have thought a lot about since I've been on council anyway. And then my question related to that is, I got the implication that there are a variety of ethics trainings that you could do, and so it'd be almost like a CEU kind of thing?
Correct. One of the trainings that we've talked about would be specific to not council, but planning commission and board of zoning appeals members, because they sit in a quasi judicial capacity versus council being legislative. So they've got a little bit more to worry about in terms of any sort of bias or keeping neutrality before a matter comes to them for consideration. So the American Planning Association Ohio chapter offers ethics in planning, for instance, that would qualify as a continuing education that would meet this training requirement.
Okay, cool. So those were my questions. Lisa?
Yeah, I also appreciated the examples, because I was reading it and then I write in my notes, well, what do other places do? This seems redundant, right? And then there were those examples. So thanks for that. I mean, I think almost all of them, though, were just a repetition of what seems to be the standard, except for Bexley, which was very behavioral, right? They very, very much addressed interactions patterns and what was acceptable and not acceptable, and I don't think we should do that. I noticed a difference was one was within 30 days and one was within 60 days. For me, I think we should have a policy that says that we all have to do this. I'm not sure that we need an ordinance for the elected officials and commission members to comply with the requirement. So I'm not sure why just having a policy document that we really follow isn't sufficient. And I mean, because council people, if we say it's required, we should do it. And commission members, if we say they should do it, then they should do it. And as a liaison to a commission, if someone doesn't show proof that they've gone through these trainings, then we should invite them to not come to meetings for a period of time until either they do it or we say, well, you've missed too many meetings and you're off. So it wasn't clear to me why we needed to establish it as an ordinance. I just didn't understand. But I do agree strongly with it's a good idea to have the training. And I guess I would give commission members longer to go through it than council members. I think I would do 30-60 if I had to pick. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just really, for the most part, echo what my colleagues have said. I appreciate, the examples, and I, sort of chuckled at the different municipalities that I was familiar with and how the language they use. So I'm sure if we, whichever way we go, whether it's policy or ordinance, folks will read ours and say, oh yeah, that's Yellow Springs. So that being said, I'm ambivalent whether it's an ordinance or a policy, but I do think the training should be available, it should be required, and there should be, the way Lisa explained it is pretty simple. You've done the training or you haven't. And if you've done the training, there's evidence thereof, and we take follow-on actions after that. Again, I think it's important that we have it, and because of examples that you cited, I think we absolutely ought to have ethics training. But again, I am ambivalent in terms of how it is executed, in terms of establishing the requirement.
Marion?
I was going to wait and see what everyone said about this, because I guess I don't really have much of an opinion one way or another.
I do have another question. So there's 2 layers to this, right? One is the training, binary, you did it or you didn't do it. The other aspect that I'm picking up on, the more that has teeth, is if there's an ethical breach, what happens? And I think that's what Laura's talking about when she talks about the prosecutorial burden. So in the as-is situation, I noticed in your memo to us, you mentioned some other cases, one which was investigated and one that hasn't come through yet or something. So in the as-is situation, if an employee of the village was found in an investigation to have committed an ethical violation, what would happen right now?
3 things would happen. Either the Ethics Commission could say it's outside the statute of limitations, the Ethics Commission can refer it to the Greene County prosecutor, or the Ethics Commission can say we're going to do a letter of reprimand and issue a public statement as a settlement.
So at this point, it doesn't have an impact on employment with the village?
It would depend on the type of infractions.
I see.
So there would be ethical violations that will be clear grounds for dismissal, while others, it may be a difficult challenge for us to back a termination, if you will, if we were to pursue that route. So I think it depends on the circumstance.
So something like this would tie our hands that if there was findings of an ethical violation, that the person would be terminated or could be terminated?
No, this wouldn't necessarily do that. This would put into place a procedure for reporting to the Ethics Commission. And as far as whether it would be up to discipline, we would basically wait and see. The Ethics Commission would still be the investigatory arm. As Laura said, we don't have the staff in-house to investigate ethics complaints necessarily. But this would also clarify the procedure of how do you make a report to the Ethics Commission, because a lot of people have confusion about how do I go about that process. I mean, is it something to where I need actual knowledge, or is it something that I'm operating on rumor and innuendo, and I've heard it repeatedly from multiple different people? And as we discussed, the standard should be something more in the nature of actual knowledge before you make a report to the Ethics Commission.
So back to Lisa's other question about why an ordinance. What are your thoughts on that?
The charter distinguishes between ordinances and resolutions, as far as resolutions are more of things that are a special, temporary, as-needed basis. Your ordinances are for things that are more permanent in nature. If council decides to vote on this as an ordinance, you're basically setting things up for the next council to come along and say, this is the way we're doing things. We like the way we're doing things because it's more clear-cut. We're going to keep doing them that way. And of course, you can always amend ordinances as a process goes forward. But with a resolution, it's not something that someone can go to AmLegal, which is our codified ordinances provider, and say, this is what the Yellow Springs Code of Ethics specifies. Because once it's on the books as a resolution, then the challenge becomes how do you maintain enforcement of that? The other consideration, and I'd like Judy to pipe up if she has any opinion on it, is that you're essentially creating another category for your records classification by maintaining those records of training. The administrator and the village clerk have more records to maintain that could be referenced in an ordinance as a permanent category series of records.
Okay. Judy, did you want to add anything?
I would just add that we've sort of looked at the punitive angle or the, that sort of training obligation that we are, that I think council's able to say, boards and commissions, we're going to require that you do this. I think that's something you absolutely can do. I like the idea of codifying it. We've had pushback from folks who did not want to take trainings. And we're sort of in a stuck position about, okay, how far do we push this? This is, I mean, it's, we'd like you to, it's a guideline versus, yeah, I'm sorry, but this is the only way to go here. And there is wiggle room when it's just a guideline or a resolution. So I like it being a little firmer, and it provides some level of protection. In my view, it's easy to step over a line, an ethical line, without realizing that you're doing it. And the more training that you get and the more you know that you have been obligated to take and understand that training, the more protection you have in terms of knowing, wait, I need to ask if this is okay. At least ask, knowing that you need to ask the question. So I mean, I would support it for those reasons.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Well, I said I was ambivalent, but Judy has pushed me over to the ordinance side.
Yeah, but Judy, what if on day 65, the planning commission member says there's this great training in Columbus with the American Planning Commission Trainers Association. They're in technical violation of our ordinance. This is why a lot of this stuff is may. Whenever you see in an ordinance may language, that's your signal that maybe it shouldn't be an ordinance. It should be a policy. You know, the law is already there. You know, people have to follow the law. You've provided the training, but I got, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, it's a guideline. And I agree with Lisa, if people aren't getting trained, then ask them to sit out. Are we going to punish you? Judy didn't make them do it in 60 days. We better report Judy. And I don't think the reporting thing is clear at all, by the way.
But you're also agreeing reason why it's better if it's an ordinance, because when people can argue magnificently, they tend to win. And I like it when it's an ordinance.
Well, but if it's a policy, it's a policy of this government. We have a resolution that says you're on a board, you've got to do this training. That's serious too. It's only lacks all this like, oh, now we've got to treat it like you just committed a misdemeanor or something.
No, I don't think we have to do anything. And I also saw language that suggested if you have a good reason, like that awesome training that's happening, a little bit in the future, or you have another reason why you have to delay. I mean, I think we can bake that all that in. So, I mean, in my mind, we're not voting on this tonight. It's a first reading. I guess the only other thing would be if somebody's in motioning not to bring this back, but I'll say, assuming we're bringing it back, I want to think more about integration with our current codes that we have. So again, the two documents I referenced. I want to, I appreciate clarifying the enforcement, penalty thing. Like this shouldn't be about silencing any voices or anything like that. And then the last thing is I just would like clarity if we are still looking at two versions, what else is saliently different besides the penalty piece? So I saw a little bit of other language, but I just want to make sure we're not missing any other key point.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful if we're going to continue to look at two of them, that it's clear what the differences are. 'Cause that was
Well,
hard.
in that case, I could suggest we bring back the one as a resolution, if Judy can assign that a number, the version that's without a penalty. as a resolution, and then integrate into both the language that you proposed from the board and commission rules and the council rules.
Okay.
As a resolution, rather ordinance?
The one without a penalty is a resolution, and then the other one as an ordinance.
Okay.
And the resolution would not be establishing a chapter of the codified ordinances, it would just be setting a policy for the village.
I would prefer the one with the penalty to be jettisoned and bring back the language as a resolution.
I guess I don't feel like I think I would want to hear more about that particular issue and look at it again. So, and I also, feel like we've talked about most of the issues. And so, Laura, that gives you an opportunity to really tell us why it's bad. Okay. Anything else? All right. So we are then moving to our next, thank you, Brianne, next piece of legislation, which is an emergency reading of ordinance 2021-12. And Judy, we can do that by title only.
Yes.
That is establishing a Village of Yellow Springs building department and declaring an emergency.
All right, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right. Josue?
That's me, thank you, Brian.
Okay.
I've got a short PowerPoint up on the screen. Hopefully will work. It did. All right, so we conducted a presentation at the last council meeting on the importance of certifying a building department for the purpose of being able to facilitate and continue the economic development projects that are underway and that are expected in the future. Most notably, what's underway is this Cresco expansion. Planning Commission approved an expansion of the Cresco labs, which will add about 112 positions over the next couple of years. So that's exciting news. I find that having an effective building department is an economic imperative. An imperative. So it's key to our economic development strategy. What's before you tonight is they're establishing a building permit. You may wonder why, if we already have a building department. Well, the challenge with the building department that we have now is that the language in the code, and what I'm referencing is chapters 1420 and 1440 and onwards, is that the code, the language in those codified ordinances doesn't meet the standards that are required now by the Ohio Building Standards Board. So we need to update the language. So that's what this first bill before you tonight does. This piece of legislation will allow us to establish a building department, and then we'll come back to council for the additional legislation seeking certification, adoption of state building codes, and fee schedule. You may be able to see from the screen that the chapters that we have already in our codified ordinances has adoption of 1, 2, and 3 dwelling code, basic building code, and national electrical code. This particular code here, there's some language there that doesn't reference updates to the codes adopted by the Ohio Building Standards Board. So that's important that we update those ordinances as well. And finally, on the miscellaneous building regulations, in 1440, the administration and enforcement on permits and fees explicitly gives the authority to the village manager as the building official. While I appreciate council's efforts in 1976 to give the village manager that kind of power, that is not how it works now. So the building official has to be certified by the state. So that's a major flaw in our language. So tonight's legislation allows the creation of a building department that would bring us into compliance with the language expected by the Ohio Building Standards, which is the office that certifies building departments. So that's the presentation on tonight's legislation. I do want to make clear our intentions. My administration's intention is that we improve the process of permitting projects in the village. There are some major challenges at the county level, and we think that it is important for us to have a little more control and streamline the process of building permits within the village. I've heard horror stories of what seems like small projects taking a very long time and slowing down economic growth, and at times discouraging small business and entrepreneurs for wanting to start a business in Greene County and in Yellow Springs. The rest of my presentations are things that you've heard and you've seen, such as the permit numbers. This is not a big operation, but you see from this chart, over the years, the higher amount of revenues collected was 47,000, and on the low end is 16,000. That was a slow year. We anticipate the next 2 to 3 years to be very busy time for Yellow Springs. There's obviously Cresco Labs. You've heard about the firehouse project. There are proposals for other development projects in the village, very complex projects. So, in addition to the Ober development on the south side of town. So, we think that over the next 2-3 years, it's going to be busy in the village. So, these fees will probably be on the higher end. Now, for us, we're looking to have an operation that is self-sustaining. We're not looking to add expense to the taxpayer locally. So the department has to be self-sustaining, will be sustained from the fees collected. These fees, as you can, the numbers are too low to support in-house staff. So our plan is to contract the service out. We currently do that now with Greene County. They collect the fees and they manage with what they get, collecting fees to support their staff. My plan would be that we have outsourced contracted activities for both building inspection and permitting. There are a lot of municipalities that do that. In fact, Xenia has a certified building department, and they contract with Greene County. Fairborn has their own building department, and they contract with private companies to do building inspection and building plan review, and their inspection is done in-house by employees. There's numerous examples throughout the state of hybrid models where it includes both staff that works for the government and contracted services and personnel.
So the fees that you have listed there, are those fees that the village has taken in, or does that include the amount that the county has taken in for village-related projects?
The latter. So all these fees are collected by the county for village projects, Village of Yellow Springs projects. So we don't see any of this money. This is all being collected by the county, and it stays with the county. They don't share any of those fees. In fact, they don't share these reports. We had to do a public records request to collect the information.
That's a sign right there.
Josue, I'm not seeing plumbing permits, which I just had to pay for one.
Yeah, so plumbing has to be done by the health department.
Right,
There are
that's right.
regulations to be done that municipalities could take it on. We're not interested in doing the plumbing because of the expertise and the work that's involved. And there are no challenges with the current plumbing inspection. So the public health department has a really good handle on those inspections.
Josue, well, how quickly do you think you could set up a department, pseudo department? And what does that mean for projects that have already begun the process with Greene County?
Projects, so the first question, it could take between 3 to 6 months to become a certified department, and we're not in control of that timeline. That's something that the Ohio Building Standards Board manages. So once we submit an application, they'll schedule a hearing and they'll go through the process. A lot of it is procedure things. Do we have a certified building official that meets all the credentials? What are the contracts in place, the fee schedule? A lot of it is administrative work, and we have to prove that we both have the resources to run a building department, and we have the certification and skill sets to properly review plans and conduct inspections. But it could take 3 to 6 months.
Right.
Your second question, Kevin.
Excuse me, what does that mean for projects that have already begun the sort of the
Green County.
Yes,
process with Greene County?
those applications and fees would have been paid already, so they would finish that process out with the county, because it already originated. And we will work it out with the county that we do not leave customers, residents, or businesses in this gray space that, or in limbo. We don't want to leave anyone in limbo. So we will ensure that any exit strategy with Greene County would ensure that anyone who submitted an application with the county will be processed through their system. Now, the idea is that they've already collected money for that permit, so they've already prepaid for a service, and I hope that they honor their commitment for the permits that the Greene County has promised.
Okay.
I have 2 questions. This ordinance says it's establishing a building department, but we established one in 76, so why are we doing it again?
I spoke with a consultant that the language in the ordinance isn't specific that it is establishing a building department. We looked through the code, and it says we're adopting a residential code, and then we're giving the village manager building official authority, and he has the, or he or she, they or them, have the authority to hire and delegate the inspections, plan review to whoever. There isn't specific language that says the village is hereby establishing a building department. So it's such a minor thing. You think, yes, it's implied with all this language. It adopts a fee schedule and it gives the village manager authorization to inspect on site and do all these things, but it wasn't as clear as saying we're establishing a building department. So for application, it would, we are doing this in part to have the language in our ordinance, but 2, it shows that we have a current legislation being passed in support of becoming a certified building department.
But then we would come back to hire a consultant to do the actual work.
To do yes, there will be a contract relationship with one or multiple contractors for the inspection and plan review, which we're allowed to do once we have a certified building department. Currently, because we are not a certified building department, we can only contract out the service to the county. If we have a certified building department, we can go back to the county. We can be in the same position we are now, but with a little more leverage over the county to say, we need you to do better. Or if there are circumstances in which we need to bring in additional contractors, we can. So I think the worst case scenario is we are back where we are today, solely contracting out to Greene County.
Was that the 2 questions, Laura? Okay. Lisa? Sorry?
Yeah, I'm just, I always like pros and cons. I'm hearing advantages. What are the potential downsides, if any?
The potential downside is we get a lot of calls, folks calling in here asking what's the status of the permit, things that we don't get now. So it could put an additional burden on administrative personnel. There are technology implementation requirements. We could be like any other building department and have a paper-based burdensome process, but that's not what we are intending to do here. We want to provide a better experience and better service. So it requires technology implementation, technology which we have already implemented, but there's an additional task or work of building it out. So we have iWork system, and the iWork system has modules for permitting process. So we already have that module in place. We will need to put in the additional work to build that out. So the downside or disadvantages is that there's an expense to us, labor and expertise that we need to develop to be able to execute this. But I think it's an investment. It's an investment in our community, in our residents, and our business owners to do this so that we can provide a better service and have a better outcomes in our own economic development strategy.
Should we be concerned about any increased liability risk?
There are with the right contractual arrangements, the building inspection, both building inspections and plan reviews, the liability could be mitigated through the contracts we have. Now, currently as it is, if an architect, engineer designs a building in a way that creates collapse, it's really ultimately a license of that architect, engineer. But the plan review folks have a responsibility to make sure that it meets code. We will mitigate that through our contract so that the village is not responsible if something goes wrong.
Thank you.
I would think another con could be the fact that we might end up paying more than we're getting in fees. I mean, we could be potentially paying more to the subcontractor or the contractor. I mean, that will be an issue.
Yes, but I think if we properly set the schedule, I think that we need to set, any schedule we set needs to be in line with the state guidelines and to cover the cost of providing the service. I know that in the past, council has been sensitive to not having high fees, whatnot, but we need to have the right fee structure to ensure that at minimum, the cost is fully covered. And I think my take from this council is that you would want to have a fee structure that covers the cost of the operation. And I think that our operation would not be any more expensive than what other offices would have. We're looking at, I've looked at the rate structures of certain various municipalities, including Greene County, and there's room for Greene County to increase their fees because there are other counties who have higher fees, and perhaps they are providing a better service because they have a fee structure that lends itself to providing a better services. So one of the municipalities I spoke with, 90% of their permits are all happening online. The submission is happening online, the payment is happening online, the plan review is happening online. It streamlines the process.
So Laura, you had another question?
No.
Okay, good. Megan, did I see? Yeah, come on up.
Hi, Megan Bachman, Yellow Springs News. I have several questions, and just a comment. I guess that it does feel good that it's going to be 3 to 6 months of work, but at the same time, this is officially establishing it. It feels really quick. It feels like this was just brought up at the last meeting. I have a lot of questions. I'm wondering more due diligence. I would love to hear from the village how many local builders, contractors, architects you've spoken with about their experience with the Greene County Health Department. I hear some anecdotes. I hear, a lot of people like to complain about things, but what are you hearing from them? What are the pros, what are the good things that they've experienced? What are the bad things? It can be, anonymous, but I think it would be good to show that the village has done that kind of work. I'd like to hear, what the village has, if they've talked to Greene County about the issues, the reasons behind the delays they're having, maybe some of the challenges that they're facing that the village might face if they have their own building department. As well as any plans that maybe Greene County has to fix some of the problems. Some good comments here about staffing issues. I would love to see kind of the impact on the village staffing, how much of your time this would take, other people's time. Some of course, will be contracted out. There's, of course, the cost is always a tricky question, but in Yellow Springs, we hear often from you all that because we're such a small community trying to do stuff on our own, it costs more. So you would think that it would cost us more than Greene County, that they would have some efficiencies of scale, but maybe not. Would love to hear more about that. And I guess just this feeling of what's the rush, and this is kind of goes to some other issues that it feels like there's this rush to do things, and where is the gathering consensus, talking to people, really giving a case of this is what we're hearing from people that are going to be affected, because there's people that are working with the Greene County Health Department right now that have worked with them for decades, and I would love to hear their experience. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Megan.
May I answer some of those?
Sure.
On the building department, I don't think of this as being a rush, particularly this legislation, because in 1976, the building adopted building code and it had an intention to have its own building department, and the language from then, it isn't up to code now, to compliance now. So this piece of legislation doesn't really get us anything other than just getting a new language into the codified ordinances. With the next two pieces of legislation, being able to have a certified department and contract with Greene County should have been done in the first place. Because right now, the relationship we have, it's Greene County or nothing. We really don't have options. We don't have regular meetings. We're just not, we are a customer in a way, but we are not treated as a customer because they aren't serving the specific needs of the village. So I think that their relationship certainly needs improvement, and perhaps it needs to be a better level playing field if we have the ability to contract the services as we need it. So I think following through the certification process to give us the authority to negotiate with Greene County or whoever is essential to our government as a charter government, and with the powers given to us through home rule. I think that is a key authority that we have as a municipality and that we should exercise.
So I think on that note, that echoes some of my thoughts. I feel that we had a detailed presentation about why, and this has been discussed 2 meetings prior to that. And really what this does is give us another tool in the toolbox. So I can't see any downside, really. I can certainly see later on that we may need to have more in-depth discussions. And I think there was some kind of, idea in the past that is relevant today. So let's go ahead and take a vote. And Judy will call the roll on this, please.
Yes, Krieger.
Yes?
Perlis.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Couch.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we're now looking at ordinance 2021-13, second quarter supplemental. Are you talking about this, Josue?
Yes, that is me.
Can we, let's read it in and get a.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Well, I say that only because apparently I referenced this in 3 different ways in 3 different places. It is actually, just for a final, it's supposed to be 2021-15, I'm sorry.
Okay, great. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right.
Thanks.
All right, Brian, I'm going to share my screen again here because there are 3 different things, 3 different projects being captured in this supplemental request. Oh, why is it sharing that? Okay. Okay, I see. Sorry, folks, it's been a while since we had to do some screen sharing here. All right, there it goes. Okay, it's on a separate screen. Okay, there are 3 projects here, and no particular order for us other than the order in which the supplemental has to be written out. There is a general fund activities are covered first. Second are special revenue funds, and then the third section are enterprise funds and other projects. So the first project on here that we're asking a supplemental, and you may think that this may be premature with the first legislation that you just heard on. The first project is to add $30,000 towards the creation of the building department. We prepared 3 ordinances and the supplemental all together because we had we were hoping for council's approval to pursue certification by the building department, and part of that process required creating a budget, and we created a budget based on what are the average fees collected by the county. So that 30,000 project is on there in supplemental, and again, we prepared it all at once, and it's on here. I think that given that there are 2 pieces of legislation that are still forthcoming to council, I think this one is subject to modification if you would like, but this one, as with everything else in the supplemental, council can modify it. But this one, I wanted to point out that we put in $30,000 as a budget for within the planning department, because building and permit expenses would fall under planning and zoning. So that's the first item on the supplemental. The second item is the Yellow Springs Clifton Trail project. If you recall, we've had several applications go into the state for the Yellow Springs Clifton connector. We want to pursue this project again, and we have financial commitments from various municipalities that will make up the $20,000. So for the purposes of this supplemental, we're putting it in the budget so that we can spend it, but we have money coming from other municipalities. I've already received our first check from Clifton, and that's an amount of $7,000, and the $13,000 will be coming from 3 other municipalities. Brian, I don't know if you want to get into greater details about the partnerships.
I think unless there are any questions.
Yeah. But the short of it is that we have commitments for $20,000 from 4 municipalities that would make up this expense. So for us, we want authorization to spend it, and its money we'll collect from other partners. And finally, we have the where's this? There it is. The $28,000 out of the electric fund. This is, you heard a presentation previously about the need for climate action and sustainability plan. The project involves pilot project initiatives as well as the creation of the climate action and sustainability plan for Yellow Springs. So we've drafted an RFP that several council members here have seen, and that it contains the project details. I'm happy to go into the specifics of the project, but among them are the need to formalize our energy portfolio strategy. As you know, we have 2 major contracts that will be expiring in 2021 and 2022. So it's important for me to formalize the strategy for energy portfolio, because that's going to guide the decisions that and the recommendations we make to council on how we replace those energy contracts. Those energy contracts have the potential of taking us from a little over 70% in renewable energy to over 90% renewable energy. So I find that that's an important piece of the work that the Climate Action and Sustainability Plan is going to address. Among other things are water losses, stormwater management, and a few other projects. But that's $28,000 there, 25 of which is going to be for contracted services, and 3,000, up to 3,000 will be for reimbursable expenses. For example, if we asked a contractor to go to a meeting with Ohio EPA or ENI partners within the village or outside the village, there may be expenses associated with that it's fair to reimburse the consulting contractor for. And that is the 3 projects for a total of $78,000. That would take our budget from $13,559,914 to $13,677 and $91. Sorry. $13,677,914.
Okay. So since this is an emergency reading, I'm going to open the public hearing. And are there any questions or comments from council members?
Well, I'd like to comment on the last item. This is it's sort of a backdoor way of hiring a consultant. It's a new consultancy position to implement the climate action plan. And I read the RFP. I made extensive comments on it. And the items that kind of bugged me the most that were in the RFP are things that I felt like I found myself saying, we have staff for that. We have staff for that. Like moving our electric portfolio to be green. Successive village managers have done a pretty good job of that. I have every confidence Josue can make the right decisions. We have John Courtney, an electric consultant we already pay. He can make these. All Josue has to do is say, we want this, and he'll find it. So water loss, again, in Josue's capable hands, and stormwater, and John. So those pieces of that RFP, I thought, that's a redundancy, So we don't have time to rewrite the RFP. We don't, this isn't coming as a resolution to hire a consultant to implement a climate action plan. And this is new.
If I may respond to I appreciate your vote of confidence, Laura, on us accomplishing the three types of projects that you mentioned. And yes, we have the expertise in-house to be able to do that. One of the things that I've been surprised that we have lacking in our office is that the documentation following the actions of getting us to over 70% of renewable energy. If you look at the historical record, there were council actions that say, yes, we want green energy and let's go buy green energy, but we didn't have a strategic plan developed. We didn't have an energy portfolio strategy developed. We just went out and bought it. And I think that what's going to come before council in a few weeks, if not maybe in 2 months, are the decision of deciding the two presentations that you heard of. Council heard from Mike over at American Municipal Power about 2 projects to replace the expiring contracts. One's hydro project and one's a solar project, very competitive. But we also have a need or a desire to have solar generation locally so that we reduce our transmission costs, and there are so many other benefits of having local generation. While I am fully capable of providing that, the cost-benefit analysis and that information, it should also involve a more holistic approach to the project, stakeholder assessments, what's happening in the region. For example, one of them is, I know internally I have my policy about how residential solar generation fits into overall strategy, and you've heard me say that I wanna, right now we're below 5%, I wanna get us to 5%. And I want to support initiatives that get us there, but there isn't a published document where we're doing stakeholder assessment, resource assessment, and combining it all to have a roadmap and a strategy for the entire community. So I think there's benefit in doing the community engagement, doing all the assessments, and putting it together as a package that will be a work that we follow for years to come, not just in my administration. Because one of the things that I've noticed of the administration is that as managers leave, so does a lot of the expertise, and sometimes even their files. There are village managers, past village managers, that I can't find files for. So I think it's important that we bring all this expertise and collect the feedback and put it in a well thoughtful packet that will follow for many years to come. So I think that's part of it. The other is to pilot projects that demonstrate the importance of well thought out, sustainable, environmentally sustainable activities. Because I think that's the test of our time, is how do we do our business in a sustainable way. And I don't know if Mary Ann would like to add anything else to this, as she's been intimately involved in these past projects. But I appreciate your vote of confidence, Laura.
Well, this has not been a straightforward path, and when we met with the Environmental Commission last week, we had a special meeting about this. People were concerned about that. And initially, we thought we would be able to hire the person who was actually helping to work on this concept and who had been digging deeply into it, and then we found out that that was not the case. We couldn't directly hire her. So that was the reason for then needing to create a request for proposal, which has happened. And then the selection committee would be two people from the Environmental Commission, Deward Headley, who created a plan several years ago, and Losway and myself. I can't think of anything more important than working on climate action sustainability. If we don't do that, nothing else. We're just we're hiding our heads in the sand. So the plan, the idea is to create a comprehensive plan and to start off as a pilot project to demonstrate the value of it. If council and staff feel that it's valuable, then we would find a way to implement it long-term.
So I have a question, because the agenda item is not to discuss the validity of this proposal to develop a climate action plan. Speaking of, going sideways,
Yeah.
this is about an emergency appropriation, right? So I guess my only question is more of like an accounting thing. Like, I thought that, and I am not an expert on all the funds, but I thought there were specific fund lines that had to do with hiring consultants or external contractors to work on things. I thought there were those specific funds, so if that is what this is, I don't understand why it's not being allocated to that fund and why it's being allocated to this fund.
There are different areas, budget line items. So in our supplementals and our budget explicitly call out personnel service, because personnel services are long-term, usually long-term liability. So to your point, the contract, the service, yes, there are in a specific line items. In this case, the $28,000, what we are asking for is authorization to add an additional $28,000 to the electric fund department. Within that department, it will be added to the contracted services. So it will be spent out of professional services line item.
Oh, so there's a subcontracted services line item within 601?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
And that's not listed on there because we're required to list our personnel services,
Thank you.
which typically create long-term liabilities.
That helps, thank you.
But right now, we do not have that $28,000 in our 2021 budget as approved by council. So we're asking to have that authorization. Where specifically the money would come from, if you recall from the conversation we had about the sale of renewable energy credits, we anticipated over 148,000 and we said we'll allocate 125, which council voted to allocate 125 towards the matching contribution for the power plant removal. That leaves a couple, several thousand there left from that sale that will be allocated, that could be allocated to other projects. This project fits well into the use of those funds. We do have proceeds from last year's sale of renewable energy credits. So this transfer, it's an accounting number. It's still coming from sale of renewable credits, money that we received last year. And once we execute the sale of this year's credits that council has already authorized, that would be trued up within the year.
Got it. So we did not vote at the last meeting to go forward with developing this climate plan.
Correct.
The minutes say that a resolution was going to be brought to this meeting. So making this financial move is in anticipation that we are at some point going to resolve to move forward with that pilot.
So,
We did not agree to that
right.
yet.
I mean, I guess I think of this as this is our opportunity to vote on the other piece that we talked about with the rec sale. But I do think, to your point, allocating this money doesn't mean that it gets spent if we want to have another step around a resolution. But I would definitely not agree with the backdoor reference, because we have talked about this since goal setting in February.
Not hiring a consultant.
Well, that's what I'm saying. This is the opportunity to make that decision, so we're having that discussion. But it certainly has been presented to us, so I mean, it's not new. This has been built up to, deciding, are we going to potentially move forward with an RFP?
Well, the RFP should have been in the packet, and we should have voted to publish an RFP, in my opinion, because it's something you will find interesting to read it, and you'll learn about what this
So
proposal
has the
is.
RFP gone out yet?
Yes. We've released the RFP on Friday.
Okay.
Now, the RFP, putting out an RFP doesn't obligate us to hire somebody or move forward with the project. That's requesting proposals. It allows us to get insights on what methodology a potential contractor use, what potential costs, what the total cost could be. There's no obligation for us to hire a particular vendor or any of those vendors that submit proposals. But
Well-
it does allow us to collect information and bids.
Okay, so we should all see the RFP right away. Go
So when
ahead.
people respond, then we could have legislation to hire somebody, and then we
Yes.
could talk about it.
No, I think we should definitely do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, I don't disagree with any of that part. Okay,
Now, the total amount does fall under, typically, the council doesn't see things under 30,000, so I'm happy to bring it back to council, but it's typically something that, these amounts we don't bring to council.
Okay. Well, it sounds like, I think in this case, because it's ultimately the vehicle to get that climate sustainability plan moving forward, we need to see it. Okay. Any other questions about the supplemental? Okay, and yes, Megan?
Yes, Megan Bachman, Yellow Springs News. I just have a question on clarifying. I thought the plan was almost complete, so I guess I'm surprised that we need a full new plan. And just from a devil's advocate perspective, we get plans all the time. We had the plan from a few years ago. We have a plan, comprehensive land use plan that's called Sustainable YS. I guess I would love to hear maybe at the next meeting, just like how this plan is going to actually take us to action and what happened to the plan that I thought was almost complete.
So, yeah, I think you said the right words. The idea of this is a plan to take us to action. No, there was no plan that was almost complete. Conceptually, the areas to be covered, some of the types of activities that might be done, the relationship between the village and the rest of the community, there were concepts put in about that, but in no way was the plan actually complete. More of sort of an outline existed.
And what we learned from that actually was, the idea was volunteers were going to do it, but they all got busy. So, okay, anything else before I close the public hearing? Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing, and Judy, if we could call the roll, please.
Yes. Curlis.
I'm going to vote yes, but I wish we'd done it the opposite way. Thank you.
McQueen.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes?
Couch.
Yes.
Thank you.
So one of the things that we are realizing as we're trying to be hybrid is now we don't see the Zoom folks anymore. And so I was not clear on 2021-12 that we were opening a public hearing. So I want to go back to that legislation, open the public hearing, give any Zoom folks an opportunity to comment, and then we'll be real clear about that in the future. So did we have anybody in the waiting room?
This is the Zoom room.
Okay.
So who's on there is room A and B, which is our overflow viewing room. That's me, and that's primarily to manage audio and a few other things on here. That's Johnny Burns, Jennifer Adams, Matt Dillon, Finance Director, and Jen Campbell, who is our HR consultant. So I suppose does anyone in Zoom would like to, is that your question? Is anyone in Zoom?
Yeah, any other comments now that we've officially opened the public hearing? Okay, all right. So, any other comments before we close that public hearing?
It seems like we have less people in this format than we did when we were on Zoom.
Yep, so that'll be good to establish. So, Judy, let's go ahead and call the roll again.
Okay, so this is on the establishing Chapter 212 of the Codified Ordinances? Oh,
Yep.
I'm sorry. This is establishing a Village of Yellow Springs building department?
Yes.
Thank you. So Curlis.
Yeah, yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes?
Couch.
Yes. Okay, last piece of legislation is Resolution 2021-20, and Judy, we can do that by title only.
Clerk, I'm going to recuse myself and step out. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Laura. Sorry, I was going to make her get me water. I missed my chance. Dang it. Oh, yes. Thank you. I love recusals for that reason.
You can do it every time.
All right.
We'll talk slowly so she has time to get the water. Approving agreement with Agraria for construction and maintenance of a multi-use trail.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
Okay. Josue?
Sure. Thank you, Brian. As you know, congratulations, you're now owners of a piece of land that will become a future bike path to Agraria. So in order for that to happen, we need to lease the property to Agraria as a condition of their Clean Ohio grant and other grant dollars they have to build out the bike path to the Agraria. So this lease does precisely that. It provides a easement and land lease to Agraria so that they can build their bike path. The terms are very generic for the most part, with the exception of two, that being that the lease has to be a 15-year minimum lease for per rules of the grant. So that language is included there. So this is a 15-year lease with a fee of $2,000 per year or for every year over that 15-year period. So that allows us to recoup $30,000 over that 15-year period, which as of today, that's about half of what we paid for the property. If you were to put it in net present values, you lose some of it due to inflation. But I think the intent is clear that the Village Council wants to create additional outdoor education opportunities, and by acquiring the land and allowing for the build out of a bike path to Agraria accomplishes that as an educational goal, but also the recreational and the health and well-being of our general population to have access to outdoor activities. Did I miss anything, Brian?
No. All right, so I think everybody's been involved with this process from the beginning. So any questions or comments before we take a vote? All right, questions or comments from citizens? Okay, then all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we are now, I guess we should get Laura back in here.
Got my water now.
With delivery.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so we're now at citizens' concerns. This is the point on the agenda where we ask for comments, typically about anything that's not already an agenda item, but we've made an exception tonight. And Judy will be keeping time. We limit those comments to 3 minutes. We'll ask you to come to the podium, state your name and whether or not you're a resident of Yellow Springs. You don't have to give your address. And since I know North Star was here first, I will have you come on up to the podium. And if you'd like to defer to Rob, then that's great. Rob, we'll have you come on up.
So I'm Rob Fairley. I am a resident of Yellow Springs. I came to the meeting tonight because I have been making my jewelry and other creations and selling them on the streets in Yellow Springs for 15 years. I raised my kids here. I have older kids now. I have younger kids as well. I was kicked off the street 2 weekends ago because someone apparently made a complaint. I tried to talk to the village manager. I didn't really feel like I was being treated very respectfully. I felt like the rug was just being pulled out from underneath me. I hadn't really done anything. I've had things worked out with the police and the businesses. You told me they said they didn't want me there, which isn't true. I went and verified it with Chief Brian Carlson. I'm not sure about this one complaint policy, because if that's the case, anybody could complain about anything going on. You'd have to stop them. So if somebody complains, business has a sign out in the sidewalk and it's blocking the way, or they have tables out on the street, same thing. You have to do it to everybody. When Chief Grody was the chief here, the issue came up, and what he said to me was, if I make an issue of you being on the public sidewalk, then I have to go to all the businesses in Yellow Springs, and I have to make them get all their tables off the sidewalk and all the signs off the sidewalk, because I had permission from the business that I was in front of. And where I was set up, I moved down there a year ago when the streets reopened because of COVID. And because I was asked to because of concerns for the sidewalk space coming by. So I moved down to there, and I was there for a year. And then the same weekend that the streets are opened up and people are putting tables out on the street again, the businesses, and I'm told that I can't do my work. And I just, yeah, again, I feel like as a citizen of Yellow Springs, I don't feel like I was treated very respectfully. I felt Chief Brian Carlson was very respectful to me, very apologetic, very understanding on a human level of what it's like when somebody has to do something, you know, drastic like that to change what's going on in their life. You know, I have little kids. It's not like I'm somebody that's just coming out of town and I'm just starting, you know, coming down the street and you come along and you say, you can't do this. It's different than that. So I just want to express my concerns because it didn't really feel very fair to me and didn't feel very human. Like this is a small town community. It's not a big city. You know, remind me people trying to develop the tourist part of Yellow Springs, but there's also the realness and the authenticity of what Yellow Springs is about, and that's like humanity and how we're relating to each other. I guess that's all I have to say.
Thanks for sharing that, Rob. I did want to ask, so my understanding was that Chief Carlson moved you to the Asanda courtyard. Is that correct?
As of, yeah, the other day.
Okay.
But it's a temporary thing because of the spatial issues there.
Okay. So, but you have been able to be...
The last 2 weekends, yeah, I found
Okay.
something I could do. I
Okay.
worked it out with the...
Good, but thank you for sharing that.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Rob.
All right. North Star. Thank you.
Do you want me to respond?
My name is Ursa North Star. My email address, if you would like the link to the information that I'm going to share, is North Star Ursa, U-R-S as in song, A, at Gmail. When asked under Freedom of Information requests, 69, it's probably more now, this was several days ago, and it's been amplifying each day. Different government health agencies in 20 different countries say that they have no record ever or anywhere of SARS-CoV-2 virus. Having been isolated or purified from any patient sample ever or anywhere that was not first adulterated with some other sources of genetic material, typically monkey kidney or fetal bovine serum. Furthermore, nobody has a single reported evidence that any bacteria or virus that has been isolated or purified has ever caused an animal or human to be sick. On his deathbed, Louis Pasteur said, "The germ is nothing, the terrain is everything," because he could not prove that the germ did anything. So the germ theory was circulated falsely for many years and continues to be so. The official narrative on the so-called virus is bogus. Beyond any conspiracy theory, it is bogus. We are witnessing firsthand the extreme danger in allowing and asking our political bodies to meddle in our cultural sphere regarding questions and issues around health, our medicines, foods, and education, all of which should be regulated by a non-political cultural body. With compassion, I still need to say that I believe the Yellow Springs Village Council has, to an alarming degree, taken extreme license with our civil liberties and constitutional freedoms. by pushing a private agenda underwritten by a larger political body via the mainstream corporately owned media. If they really wanted to keep us, if you all really wanted to keep us safe, you would begin by enforcing the speed limit in and around the village. In the face of ugly muzzles, ugly mandates, and ugly stand on X directives, there is no religion higher than the truth. Yellow Springs is a community of freedom-loving, intelligent beings, and not a sinking ship of obedient, leashed dogs. Thank you.
All right, thanks, North Star. Do we have any other citizen concerns?
Hello, my name's Marie Miller. I go by Mitzi, and I am a resident. On April 14th, I had a knee replacement, and well, I've been told I have to walk 30 minutes a day. I started with a walker, and matter of fact, I'm still using a walker right now on our sidewalks. I'm really concerned about the vegetation on sidewalks and the impact it's having on safety for travel for residents and individuals in town. I know that the grinding down has been very effective, but I really feel strongly that it shouldn't be complaint-driven. It's something that maybe a village employee ought to go out every couple months or 3 months and do an assessment versus a yearly assessment on our sidewalks. What I did find is that hostas, bushes, hedges, grass in cracks, ivy, and the big culprit is this winter creeper that will catch you or your feet. And one of the things with seniors is, as you get older, frequently you don't look down, and so you're missing that, and this can be a real hazard to people's mobility and potentially cause injury, physical injury to people. Most of the walkers, this one is 23 inches. Wheelchairs are 25. Electric wheelchairs are around 25 as well. And the sidewalk near me is 44 inches, but some of them are 36 inches. And what I've noticed is that people aren't taking responsibility for taking care of their sidewalks in front of their homes. And they're putting people at risk. And I've documented this. I've shared pictures with you, and this is just a small portion. And I want to commend the city for what you've done already, and I very much support West Limestone's sidewalk being created. Walking on that street, it's a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. People are going 40 miles an hour. I was almost hit the other day. Frequently, if I'm with my walker, I have to point and ask, point to people to move over. So I'd like us to really look at this issue. And I also want to speak to the residents of Yellow Springs, and in hopes that they'll go out and look at their sidewalks and take the time to correct these issues so that residents are safe in town. Thank you.
Thanks, Mitzi. And you may remember that we've talked about incursion of vegetation before, and it was actually about a year before COVID that we were, when the crew was out and they saw issues, we had a nice little sign that we would hang up. And so I think this is a reminder, because things take priorities, and then this is a really important one. And it's something I notice all the time. So thanks for sending that message out. I think we've got to get back on it. And it also reminds me, someone asked me, can iWorks be used for these kinds of complaints? Okay.
Yes, and the photos that are taken on iWorks are GIS tagged, so not only could you put the location, but the photos are also geo-tagged, so we know where you've taken the photo. So I appreciate this, Mitzi, because as you guys know, we're complaint-driven. If we went out and tagged in every overgrown bush on the sidewalk, I don't know how long I would have my job, but, it certainly would raise a lot of complaints, because there's a lot of it. There's a lot of it, and some of it is just unacceptable. Just picture number 4, there's maybe, 6 inches of the sidewalk that's exposed. And so this is a real challenge, and as we look to do these improvements, I appreciate council's support, because it's not going to make a lot of these homeowners happy about trimming their gardens, if you will. It's been allowed to overgrow for too long, and we just have to get at it and do some enforcement. The other piece that Mitzi brought up is the conditions of our sidewalk. As you know, every year we set money aside to do sidewalk grinding, repairs and replacement. And we budget that every year, and we do as much as we can every year with it. So it's going to be a while before we get to the entire town, but we're committed to putting capital funds aside for those improvements every year.
So let's make sure Philip put something out about all the different things you can do on iWorks, all right? But I also, I'm going to encourage that we do what we did a couple years ago, pull out those little door knocker things and say, and it can be updated to be a Be Kind message if it's not already.
And we did it last year at the beginning of the school year, so that we can improve the sidewalks for children as they're walking to school. So we can re-engage in those activities.
I just add one more thing, that I would be more than happy to volunteer placing those on homeowners' doors. I do plan to take an active role in addressing complaints and to the city in the area and our community, because one of the things I did talk to was 2 individuals that lived at Blossom Place, who both said that they won't use the sidewalks, they use the streets because it's so unsafe for them. One has a scooter and is a vet, the other person has balance issues, so.
I appreciate all the complaints that you'll be heading our way, Mitzi, and I'll speak with our village solicitor about deputizing you as enforcement officer.
Okay, we're going to move into, yes, sorry, Megan, yes.
Megan Bachman, Yellow Springs News. First of all, I just want to thank you all for coming back in person. I know it took a lot of work, Judy and Sean and many other people, so I know it's taking that leap of faith, and I appreciate that because I think it does make a difference. I've appreciated the dialogue that you've all had with each other and us. And then just secondly, I just want to say, it feels like sometimes our village is kind of working by Mark Zuckerberg's old motto, move fast and break things. I know that you're trying to be proactive, but we don't want to break things. I know Facebook's kind of broke our democracy, but I guess I'm referring to some recent things like the DORA. I think people really need to hear where these proposals are coming from. I think more transparency about the origin of some of these things, because people will start to wonder. I always said transparency breeds trust, secrecy breeds conspiracy. And, there's some people with a lot of money and a lot of power, and maybe they make a complaint about the building department, and now we have our own local building department. Not saying that's true, I'm saying that's a story. So the DORA, where does the DORA come from? I feel like it's very important that the community is brought along, because another motto from the social justice movement is, move at the speed of trust. And as we're coming back in person, we're coming out of an emergency in the sense of moving fast. I would really love to see the village do a little bit more of just communicating with the community, of gathering public feedback, specifically gathering the feedback of stakeholders on some of these issues, like the local business owners and the liquor license holders for the DORA. So I would love to see and to hear some proposals maybe from council about how we're going to actually engage, because we can finally move out of online, we can come back in person, we can do some things face to face, and I think that would be really important for our community to move forward towards our future together in the post-COVID environment. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Megan.
Mayor Brown?
Quickly,
Okay.
we're about 40 minutes behind on our...
Megan, I appreciate your comments. One of the things that we have planned, and it is a town, we had scheduled as a town hall just because of, folks are still sensitive about in-person participation. But what I have planned for, I don't know if Sean, you have it up there, but it's a town hall to do a mid-year review. And I'm going to talk about what are the administration's plans for the next 6 months. As you know, I have a performance plan, which is something that council will evaluate me on at the end of the year. And I'm going to have a conversation with the community. These are the things I'm expected to do, and there are several projects on there. And I think that that's going to, one, at a minimum, inform folks of what I'm working over the next 6 months. And so that they have, one, get the big picture of what we're working on, and there'll be several opportunities to weigh in on the various projects that we have. So I'm in agreement with you. I think that we need to talk more, and we need to share about all the activities we have. I think one of the challenges I face is that we're a very ambitious community, ambitious council, ambitious administration, and the team moves fast, and I recognize that not all of our citizens can move at the speed that we move, so we need to slow it down a bit and be more, communicate more. I don't like the talking about transparency and conspiracy, because we're not hiding anything from the public. I think we move fast, but we do not move in secrecy.
Okay. But again, we've recognized for a while now that we've got to improve communications, and so I'm glad that you've got some ideas for things to do with that. All right, special reports. Mary Ann.
I had some thoughts about opening this up for council to see if there was any input in the Yellow Springs Development Corporation directions that we wanted to go. Lisa and I have talked about this. I guess I don't really have anything to say right now. Lisa, do you want to say anything about it?
Well, I was wondering what this special update was about, because I hadn't been included in any of the... But then we did talk about it then. Yeah. So my understanding is where we are right now is that the Development Corporation did some debrief on some of the past activities, and I'm going to recommend at the DC meeting that tomorrow we add this to the July DC meeting and have a conversation at DC. In particular, Marianne had concerns that the DC didn't have documented values and wasn't aware of all the work that had been done to talk about the DC values earlier on. So I'm trying to work with Gina Marie Cox to pull some of that documentation. It was really helpful for me to think about that, because as new people roll onto the DC, if you haven't been involved from the beginning, and the longer we're going on with the DC, the more we'll need to think about these things that could be considered part of orientation. So I think you can expect a report, additional reports, and typically also, commission and DC reports are in the second meeting of the month anyway, so.
I guess I'll say a few more things. I'm sort of getting back in this groove. It was village government really that took the leadership in developing the Development Corporation. The things that are being talked about now in the Development Corporation, I think, are how do we move forward? What are the areas that we want to look at? For example, funding. Where would we get grant money? How would we do loans? So there's a group that's been looking at that. There's been a group that I've been involved in looking at housing. It seems like there are a couple other areas. So I thought it would be good for council, if council had input that they wanted to say, hey, we'd like you to focus on this, or we want you to consider this. For example, one of the things that I think is important to the village is to be having market rate rental housing. That's not going, the village government's not going to do that. There's not a lot of incentive for for-profit developers to do it. Home Inc. is beyond their capacity. They don't do that. The Development Corporation and development corporations in general do this kind of thing. So that might be a thing that council could say, YSDC, we would like you to put some energy into this, see how this might be done, and report back to us. I just wanted to create this space for council to be providing input into the Development Corporation if we wanted to.
Yes, I agree, and I do think that one of the structural challenges of our meeting agenda is that at that second meeting of the month when we talk about commissions, and that's when you have the Development Corporation minutes and the report and all that, is that comes at the end of the agenda when we all, at that point, for most nights, it's like 10 o'clock. So it's not really a good time to have a conversation. So perhaps when we have that information from the DC that says, these are the subgroups that we have going, that we could have that on the agenda a little earlier, so we're not trying to jam it in the end.
Sure. I mean, in fact, it could be a standing special report, every other month or whatever, But I mean, it could come there. So.
Yeah, I think it would help.
Mhm. Okay, so Judy, do we have a treasurer's report?
We certainly do.
Okay.
Here you go. As of March 31st, 2021, the village has $10,759,957 under active investment. This is an increase of $692,268 since the beginning of 2021. Earnings from investments from January through March 2021 were in Raymond James at $5,614 and West Banco at $686,654. Last treasurer's report was given in March of 2021, just prior to moving all funds out of Star, Ohio and into West Banco. Brad Drager's quarterly report is included, and that was written in mid-April. The village currently has 0 funds in Star, Ohio, $492,245 in the Raymond James investment account, and $10,267,712 in the West Banco account. Presently, Raymond James investment account, which are CD purchases, are earning an average of 1.83% on a 1.68-year commitment, and the West Banco rate fixed at 1.25% with nearly immediate availability. And Star, Ohio, we are not involved, but at this point, they're earning 0.08%. Of note with regard to investment currently is that 95.2% of the village's funds are in a general account at West Banco, with a total of 4.8 in Raymond James, none in Star, Ohio. This is atypical, but it continues to be the best approach in the current economy, and West Banco funds are immediately available. Treasury rates are continuing to rise slowly, which is a positive indicator of a return to more normal market rates, but the return is on a slow path. They're currently at 0.81% for a 5-year bond, which is an increase of 0.5% over May of 2020. The long-term average, however, is 3.81%. We have, again, the Pac-Man chart that represents account balances, basically saying most of this stuff's in West Banco because it works better there. And Josue has some sexier-looking charts that he's going to provide you that give more of a policy perspective.
I don't know, sexier is the term, but these charts up on the screen, they represent, there's 3 particular charts we want to share with you today. One is the interest income, the cash position, and the average return on assets. So As you can see from our net interest, we had a very good performance, as Judy pointed out, in 2019 and 2020, and then pandemic hit, and so we've seen significantly less interest income as a result of what's happening in the market. The West Banco money market account is still our best investment tool. We were able to negotiate a good rate on that money market account, and we did so because we moved a lot of our assets over to West Banco, and this was pre-pandemic, so they could not have predicted what the pandemic did. Positive thing about cash position, as you can see, that chart just continually rise. That is very good for us. We've passed that 10 million cash asset threshold, so that's the highest it's been. So that's really good for the village. The net return on cash assets, this is looking at all of our cash assets, whether it's sitting in an investment account or a regular operating account. So this gives us a good return, a good view on how our overall cash are performing. So not just the money that's invested. Now, in the current situation, all of our money is considered investment because it's sitting in a money market account and it's secured and it's available to us almost immediately. So the net return on cash assets, 2019 was our best year to date. 2020, we're close to that 1%, and 2021, we're a little bit above a 0.25 percentage point. Which is not bad for the first quarter. I think we're going to be reaching that 1% or 1.5% in total for the end of the year. So I think that's really good given where the market conditions are. And this speaks to the strategy that we have deployed for the last 2 years, which is to be strategic about our investments and in partnership with our investment consultant, finding the best investment opportunities that, one, preserve capital and give us the best returns. So this is how well our investment strategy is working.
All right, thank you both. Any questions for Judy or Josue?
Yeah, when I do the math, I'm getting this crazy rate of return. I mean, like 6.38% for half a year on basically money market and cash in West Banco. I mean, I want to move my money to West Banco. I mean, no, I'm serious. Like, it's 686,654 on 10,759,000. I'm just saying, if you do that math, that's 6.38% for half a year.
Well, our negotiated rate for the money market account is 1.25%. So we're making really good returns on the money market account.
I mean, I'm getting over 6%.
I would have to look at the Matt's online, and I guess we can try out the.
Well, just, I mean, look.
Yeah, I think we probably
look at it,
need to.
because we got to move on, but that's great.
Yeah.
I'm happy.
See? Marianne, did you have a comment?
I
Let's
just
give
wanted
everybody
to
a rebate.
thank you, Judy, for doing this work. It's, I appreciate how you explain things, and of course appreciate the money that's coming in.
Okay, yeah, thank you, everyone. And one of the things I mentioned to Josue is that maybe in a couple months, we should do a review of the relationship with Brad Drager, which I think we're ultimately happy with. But, as we move into our discussion about budget, it'd be good to know what the benefits and potential costs of that relationship are.
Yeah, I thought it was affirming. I don't know whether anyone else noticed that diagram where they were putting forth a new meaning of infrastructure and the alignment of that with what the village has been talking about in terms of climate, education, broadband, equality. I was like, well, we're right on that.
Yeah.
But I still think we need to keep our focus on what's going on under the streets and keeping going with grinding on the sidewalks and those things that are important, but not that shiny. It all still needs to happen.
All right. So with that, let's move into old business. And Brianne, you have an update for us on the Kingwood Solar?
Speaking of shiny things. So the time is coming soon for the village to decide whether or not it wants to formally intervene in the project. As we discussed back in April, Kingwood filed its application, and the Power Siting Board has not yet deemed that application complete, but there were some data requests that were submitted last week, so I anticipate that will be coming soon. Of course, the village was not served with a copy of the application, but none of the project area is actually within the geographic limits of the village. So if we were going to intervene, we would be doing under a different section of the administrative code than the townships have done. To date, Xenia, Cedarville, and Miami Townships have all filed for intervention, and they passed their resolutions to do so back in February before the application was ever docketed. The other two interveners that have filed to intervene under the same section, the village could theoretically, are Tecumseh Land Trust and an agricultural LLC that is a neighbor to the project. So I sent a written summary of that to you, and I want to abbreviate my time as much as possible because you've got other things to do this evening, but I do want you to be mindful that the time is coming when you're going to have to decide whether or not, as a council, you want the village to formally intervene or just submit public comments.
Okay, thanks, Brianne. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, I think, one thing that is of interest to me is what Tecumseh Land Trust's position is, given that we have such a close relationship with them. So I don't know what that means exactly, but I will certainly be reaching out to talk to them, and so.
And actually, in terms of good timing, Krista McGaw was supposed to present this evening, and she had to postpone that to the 21st. So if you like, I can communicate with her about if she's able to address that in the presentation.
Great. Okay. All right. So on this next topic, let me ask Laura and Lisa. You had mentioned at our prior meeting wanting to, think more about this. Have you thought about it? Okay. All right. So let's have a little bit of a discussion then. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what I did was brought this up with the Art and Culture Commission. Well, first I asked Judy to pull past documentation related to street musicians and busking, and it seemed to me to just be really close to the heart of art and culture because this group had been involved with this before. So we added it as new business to the meeting that we had last week. And the Art and Culture Commission is really interested in thinking about this more, particularly as it relates to the way our policies about expressions of different kinds of arts on the street help to define the culture and the vibe of Yellow Springs. So we barely got into the conversation, and the people that were on the commission hadn't really read the old policy documents and things like that. So I expect it to be a more significant conversation at the July meeting. And then I don't know whether they'll have it ready, but I would be asking them to make some recommendations, either for action or recommendations for additional fact-finding, maybe talking to people that are street musicians and busking, talking about their experiences, talking to community members and business owners about the advantages and disadvantages. So rather than me forming my opinion, I have a really solid working commission that I know is interested in this topic.
Right.
So that's I don't have opinions yet. I just
Okay, well, that's good to hear. I mean, that's what we look to our commissions to do, is provide capacity. And you certainly have some institutional knowledge from people that were on the Public Arts Commission before. Okay, great. Laura?
I've had a lot of conversations with Jean Lohman about this topic, about how's the culture of Yellow Springs different now than it was, say, in the 60s and 70s. And he's very fascinating to talk to, but he wants to think more about this as well and come to the Arts and Culture Commission to talk and be a resource. But I'm feeling like we need to be more welcoming to buskers and street vendors. Like, we need to, I think we're becoming maybe, as somebody said, are we becoming that grumpy person in the village? Like, where it makes me a little crazy when I hear that we're complaint-driven, because I've said this to Chief often, just because somebody complains doesn't mean law enforcement does anything, because you first ask, you know, are they doing anything wrong? You know, and this, you know, in the racism awareness area, we have become more aware that white privileged people call. That doesn't mean we have to do anything about it. You know, John Fee and the Freedom Drummers, all African American, were drumming. They generally drum between 12 and 6, and on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday in a public place, and get called on. And like Nipper had the good sense to drive by and say, I don't see anything wrong, and didn't bother them or move them along or say, you've got to stop doing that.
So maybe I'll jump in there because, you know, I think we have to remember that we represent a diverse community with a lot of different opinions about these issues. And I've been hearing enough, and, you know, forwarded those pictures from the other day, to think that it's easy sometimes to say, like, yes, we're creative, so like all the buskers in the world, and we're open, so you can set up a table wherever you want on the sidewalk. But I'm starting to feel that a couple things. One is we're losing balance and quality of life. And so I want to be a little bit more serious about some of those issues. And let me specifically attach to that the ridiculous level of the motorcycle noise and their radios. I mean, this has gotten out of control, and we have to do something about this. And so when I think about things that we should be focusing on to recapture that balance, and I think also it affects the visitor and the residents' experience downtown. I mean, a citizen asked to have a conversation about our policies, and we had to pause after every 5 words because it was so loud. And I don't have hearing issues, but I mean, you could not, and we were sitting on the porch of the hotel. So we're not going to figure this out tonight, all right? But I want to get out there that I think there's some room for thinking about permitting, because that weekend when those pictures were up, I was going downtown and literally just all these new vendors setting up all over the place, all right? And I was like, wow, you know, this hasn't happened before. Rob mentioned like all the new tables that are going out, right? I mean, I love that it's fun and great, but we also need to have some space on our sidewalks. And so anyway, so I want us to be thinking about that. I think there's a true call from the community to look at this. And, you know, we're hearing enough about just sort of the increased impact on our downtown. But I want to be true to our values. I want to be welcoming. I want to figure out, you know, a way that we do this. And that's why I think maybe there's a way with permitting that helps just people understand the playing field a little bit better. And maybe, you know, that also involves an anti-racism, anti-hate statement to like talk about our values. So I don't know, but I wanted to get a few ideas out there. I think we should all have conversations with folks and come back with more concrete ideas.
And interestingly, until I did that call for historic documents from Judy, I didn't realize we already had permitting on the books. It's already there. Mm-hmm. So maybe we're not doing it, but that's already there. Mm-hmm. So that's not a new thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm. There's room for improvement on the permitting process, and you know, there's some things to improve there. Thank you, Brian, and all for pointing out the obstruction and of the sidewalk. You know, I really didn't like that we had to move Rob, but we did because there's obstruction on the sidewalk as they were being caused by other vendors, and that's a challenge that we're facing. Folks are obstructing the sidewalk, and we already have narrow sidewalks as it is. The businesses that were referenced were different because a permit from Planning Commission authorized the Green Canteen to set up a table. And a few other businesses have been allowed to do that through the permitting process and Planning Commission. So we have challenges that we need to have the conversation about.
And I appreciate that particular example because that was one where I do think it was approached in a kind way. Chief Carlson explained to me the move.
Yeah.
And honestly, they have been so busy, Rob and Dave, the last couple weekends, that has become like a very active area. And it takes some of it off the sidewalk. So, I mean, it's something to think about.
One community member said, we don't have street fair anymore. Like, wouldn't it be great if we designated an area where all the people who are selling stuff on tables
Yep.
had a special, like a place, like an outdoor open market? And, I loved that idea. I haven't thought about where the heck that might be.
So actually, Johnny and Josue have some great ideas that I think could be brought back with this discussion as well. So rather than, I want to be sensitive to time.
Yeah, well, I'd like to
So-
hear any existing ideas before the next art and culture meeting, so I'll reach out to you or to Johnny.
Reach out to me and we'll coordinate a meeting.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
And it does not involve Short Street.
Oh, God, I'm never going to say anything that has Short Street associated with my name.
But I took a picture too on a Sunday morning, and part of the reason we're losing street space is there's all kinds of other stuff we, the village, have put in the street, on the sidewalks.
Well, and I think we should be open to talking about all the above.
Yeah.
All right? So, so I definitely want to have more of this conversation. And so I appreciate that everyone's got thoughts. Let's go ahead and move into new business. And first up, all right, yes, let's talk about permanent options for virtual meetings. How do we start that? Josue?
There's, as you can see tonight, you look at our participation on Zoom, we have, we've got Johnny, Matt, which is part of my team, our consultant on there, so we don't have any public participation on Zoom. I just jumped over our Facebook, and we have 9 people. I don't see the same level of engagement as we did when we were all Zoom. So I think that maybe it's just our first meeting, maybe it just happens to be the day, but I think the Zoom and virtual options is a civic engagement, citizen engagement tool of our time. I know I was happily surprised to see one planning commission member being able to join and being able to take family tasks and duties while also being engaged in a planning commission meeting and council meeting. So I think there's a real opportunity to have an engaged citizen by allowing the virtual option. I think it's good for being an attractive body for candidates. I know that's one of the things that it's in the village goal is how do we engage the next generation of leaders, and how do we promote leadership involvement and participation in local government, and I think is continually to be accessible and having the virtual option. I think the state legislator with change to our ordinances would allow us to have virtual meetings well into the future. I don't know if Brianna or Judy wants to weigh in on it, but I think it's something that council should consider moving forward.
All right, thanks, Josue. Brianne?
Just to build on that, we had the discussion that council put in the rule that you can meet virtually now in any sort of local emergency that restricts the size of public gatherings. But another issue came up with respect to, is it a disability accommodation to count someone as present in person if they're participating virtually? Say, break a leg, you can't get here to the Bryan Center. Now that we do have a hybrid meeting model, if you want to allow a council member or a board or commission member to be able to do that permanently, you as a council have the ability to say, this is going to be our meeting procedure. We are going to accept virtual attendance for ourselves or for our boards and commissions. So that's just something that you can do regardless of what the legislature decides is present and in person under the revised code. Again, that definition goes until July 1st, but the Municipal League had, based on feedback from its members, not just the Village of Yellow Springs, said there are many communities where they like the flexibility of having members able to meet from home, and it's up to you.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things after our last meeting, there was some misinformation about what was confirmed about meetings, and I was a little bit disappointed that we were characterized as not being clear on those things. But number one, it did become clear that virtual meetings can't happen until the end of June. And then secondly, as I expected, that there should be accommodations, all right? But I think part of what I'm hearing is more that I would rather have a council member participate in a meeting actively, even if they can't be here, than not participate at all. Mm-hmm. And what the prior read, pre-COVID was that if you were out of town, you could call in and listen. It's happened to you, Kevin, right? You can call in and listen, but you can't participate. I don't think that is helpful. Right. I think we've all committed to the idea that we want to be in person. I agree with Megan. Conversations are much better. It's nice not to have to recognize everyone all the time, and you guys are just speaking. Yes, it's great. But to eliminate that option when we can have a commission member or a council member engaged, I agree with Josue that we should not take that out of the mix.
I agree. I agree for a couple of reasons, and that's why I'm really interested in understanding what our kind of home rule capabilities are for defining how we do this. Mm-hmm. I actually had a conversation with Judy about this. I was so, I really noticed at our last meeting that was on Zoom that Matt, he was at home, he had his kid on his hip, mm-hmm. and he was actively participating in the meeting. And I started to think, as we come up to have people putting forward their names to run, and we know we want greater diversity on this council, and at least people to think about it. And if you have kids at home and you have to leave your home, I feel like maybe if we have some options, different folks would say, hey, maybe I can serve, and they'd put their name forward. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to go into this too much, but I do want to, disclose that during COVID, I had a very significant, unanticipated, unasked for job change to be now the dean of a university. I didn't apply for it. I didn't. It came on me, and you just can't say no. Well, it's been cool because there's a travel shutdown, so I haven't had to fulfill the aspect of my job that will require me to travel all the time. Starting at the next meeting, I'm not going to be at the later meeting this month. Already, I know of 6 meetings between now and February that I am not going to be able to attend. And it's going to really create a challenge for my continued service on the council if there isn't a way for me to participate remotely. And that breaks my heart. And I just want to put it out there. I'm not saying anybody should do anything just because of Lisa Krieger, but it is a reality of my life going forward.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like there's at least interest in seeing what those options look like. Does anyone not agree with that, Laura?
No, I'd like to know what the legal options are for us. I think about the occasional meeting where we get to see a lot of our fellow citizens, and mm-hmm. I just want to make sure we all are present for those moments when we all need to be there face to face with folks. But mm-hmm. So I'm thinking about limits, like mm-hmm. can we limit it to 6-10 meetings a year that you could, if you're out of state, is that going to be a rule? If you're out of state, you can Zoom in. You know, I don't want people just to choose because they don't want to show up and face the public, for example. None of us would do that, right? Like, we want to face our public,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So,
I mean, I think that's true, actually, of this group, anyway. Okay, so, well,
even think
there'll be
of that.
more to discuss, and, yeah, I think we should, we'll come back to that at a future meeting. Okay, we've got, yes, Mitzi?
Can I just say something?
And actually, we'll need to take the mic to you, because
Okay.
we can't hear you back there.
I'm not very computer illiterate, I would say, but there's other people like me too, and having the opportunity to be able to come, even if it's in another room, and have somebody assist me, but able to speak, is real important to me.
Yeah.
And I think it's to other residents too, that we have that option.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think the more accessibility, the better. So, all right, we've got 2 nominations. One is for the Board of Zoning Appeals. Judy, are you telling us about that?
I can tell you about that. Board of Zoning Appeals has no council representative, and it can be a little difficult to find folks who are qualified actually to sit on that board, because you need some degree of technical knowledge. So I sort of recruited Matt Raska, who's taken an interest in a number of things, and he agreed, and then was interviewed. Brian, you interviewed him, so
Along with Denise Swinger, that's been our protocol.
Yes, thank you. And so I'll just say that that's sort of how that came about. There were also ads in the Yellow Springs News, to which we received no response repeatedly, so.
So I think
followed up.
yeah, and so this ad, I think everyone knows Matt Raska. He's been very engaged, and we had a great conversation. And so I'd like to nominate him for BZA.
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Next up is Environmental Commission.
Yeah.
Mary?
So Nancy Lineburger had expressed an interest in being on the Environmental Commission. She and her husband moved to town maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And I think one of the reasons they moved here was because of their passion around environmental issues. And so Nancy I think she came to the Earth Day gathering that we had and asked if there was an opening, and there happens to be one more opening on the Environmental Commission. So Laura knows Nancy. Laura has talked with her. I talked to her extensively about how she might like to be involved, which is particularly, we're going to be starting a column in the Yellow Springs News once a month, and that's something she's particularly interested in doing and writing for. So I'd like to nominate Nancy for the Environmental Commission.
All right.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. And then, Marianne, we had one other piece, which was the letter, the sign-on letter.
Yeah, so this is something I got in one of the listservs that I get. The legislature put into the budget a change in how some affordable housing developments would be property taxed. Specifically, what I'm aware of is tax credit projects. So these are rental projects. And when they work out, when a development agency works out a tax credit project, there's a very thin line between making it work and making it not work. And previously, the state did not charge the property tax to the market value. They charged it based on the actual rental values that they were getting. Well, now they're trying to change that, and my understanding is that if it passes, House Bill 110 with that amendment, that essentially would mean no tax credits projects, especially in Yellow Springs, where the market values are high, but the rental rates would be low and based on people's income. So this sign-on letter, I mean, you could, if council chose, you could say, Marion, you can sign on to this letter for the village, or we could write a letter to Governor DeWine and the General Assembly somewhat based on this, which is what I was thinking of doing. So I'm asking council's approval to do that. And, I'm not, I could bring the letter back, but, and I'm not sure of the timeline, because when I saw the information I got, which was at the end of last week, it said you need to get it in right away, so.
Any concerns?
I just wonder who's pushing it. Like, do you have any idea what's
Well,
behind this
I-
With the
legislation?
Ohio Housing Council?
I know.
no.
No, not
You mean
this
who's
letter.
pushing taxing them?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
suppose the Republicans.
Fair guess.
That's okay, we don't have to discuss it. Yeah, I'm fine with you signing.
Okay,
So-
yeah, I'm good.
Sign or write a separate letter?
It's always better to write a different letter
I
because
think it
they
would be better
they
to
notice the
write.
genericness,
That
and
makes
so. Okay,
Am I hearing approval for that?
yep, everybody's good.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, yes, thank you for doing that. All right, I'm going to recommend that manager's report is questions only, unless, Josue, is there something really?
I provided an update on the pool. The black topping is the key that's happening. I think that's going to have a potential disrupting traffic flow, and you're going to get complaints. Big thing to point out, thank you, Brian, for pointing out the dog park. We did pour the concrete around the fence. That's the work that we are doing. We also replaced 12 feet of sidewalks on North Winter Street. So I specifically wanted to point that out because Missy brought this concern, and so we replaced 12 feet of concrete sidewalk.
Okay, great. Awesome. Questions for Josue? All right. If not, then we're going to talk about future agenda items.
Okay, so do you want the pay-to-stay ordinance and the source of income ordinance to come back for the next meeting?
Yes.
And then you want a resolution on ethics, and we're also bringing back the ordinance, so that
Yeah.
you can look at both?
Yes.
Do you want the Busker existing ideas for sidewalk space issue to come back?
Definitely, let's hope it can be the 21st, but let's make sure we see what else we've got.
I will be absent at the meeting, and ACC will not have yet
Yeah.
talked about it more.
Okay, so, yeah, so I agree. So then and you'll be the first meeting in July, you'll be here?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, so let's do that.
Okay.
Okay, what else?
Yeah, so I had in the packet the article which I had submitted earlier about exclusionary zoning, which is what we have in having single-family zoning. And I also included some quotes from the Biden job plan, I think, where they are planning on giving preference to communities who do away with that kind of zoning in terms of grants for housing. So I would like to have a short time on the next agenda to bring this to council, to have a 5-10-minute discussion about whether council is interested in having planning commission review our zoning for making it less classist.
Sure.
Okay, and are we going to have something in the packet about climate sustainability plan?
It sounds from the approval, but in the supplemental budget, that council wants to have, look at the RFP and have that
Okay. And
discussion, so-
if there's any other documentation?
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'll send out the RFP. Yeah, I guess let's talk over the next week about what makes sense to bring back a resolution or an or a discussion item related around climate action and sustainability.
Yep.
Let's see, when is our next meeting?
21st.
Because the Environmental Commission will meet, I think, the 17th. So it'll meet before then, so that would be helpful.
Okay. Anything else?
I'd have a request of Josue and Brianne. I really want to talk about the Citizen Review Board legislation because it's on the agenda as amended personnel policy manual, and truly, I'm not sure what form, if it comes forward from 365, in what way it should come forward. I mean, I've even thought maybe it needs to be a charter amendment, and I'm just not sure, and I'd like to explore that.
I would agree. I think it's not ready. I think, and the more we dig into some of the complexities of implementation of citizen review boards in a community this size, it just, what is the, what did I say earlier about rushing?
Those got conflated. Those are two items.
Okay.
There's an ordinance, and then there is a proposal for creation.
Right, because, that's the personnel policy
Yeah.
manual that we haven't gotten yet.
That's not what, I'm not reading it right.
Yeah, but I can see where that would be confusing.
Oh, sorry.
So did you want that dropped?
No, I was not reading it.
Okay.
Yeah, because
we didn't-
it should be a discussion before it
Yeah.
would come as an ordinance.
Yeah, make it
so.
discussion, and then approving amended personnel policy manual, what's that?
I'm gonna ask that get pushed further down, because there's some, I'm seeing some challenges with the amended personnel policy. For example, one of the things that I wanna have a better control over is the payout of sick leave. There's a move, various municipalities, including Xenia and Fairborn, they've eliminated this cash out of the sick leave policy unless people retire. We had an incident last year that really hurt us financially, where somebody brought in over 1,100 hours and then cashed them out here before going to the next
Exactly.
job. The ORC already limits that, and so we're doing something that other municipalities aren't doing. Not very popular among the personnel, the staff. You could probably imagine why. And so there are policy issues that policies I want to change to limit the financial liabilities for the village that are not very popular among the personnel. And so I'm working through that, and this is not ready. There's a lot more conversations I need to have with personnel. I want to ensure that we are providing the best benefits that we can for personnel, but I want to do it in a way that's fiscally sound for the government and our taxpayers, and that can be a difficult balance to strike. So for those reasons, I want more time on the policy manual.
Well, go ahead. Laura.
And on that point, I want to bring some kind of proposal at a minimum to allow elected officials to have access to our health insurance, even if that means they pay full freight, what the premium is. And the research Judy and I have done basically shows it's all over the map. You can go from like Miami Township trustees and fiscal officer getting their health insurance premiums paid by the township, including family policies, to obviously no access, to access if you pay the full premium. It just goes all over. Part-time, full-time, yes, no, it's just, there's no consistency.
Okay.
At some point down the road, new topic, sorry, I would like to hear an update on the process to collect police encounter data, because we haven't talked about that for a while.
Yes.
Thanks. Not next meeting, but I'd like to hear something.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, and I expect not all of the items listed here and what we just talked about will be at the
Right.
next meeting either.
Not all 10 items?
I heard like 20. Okay, so before we think about that too much, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everyone.
Good to see you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
yeah, good to be face to
I
face.
appreciate the face-to-face. I wasn't sure how it was going to go down. I was feeling a little conscious, if you will, about it, and wasn't sure. But yeah,
Well, I noticed a lot of interesting expressions, so I think everybody's kind of like.
Well, there was one moment I couldn't hold back.